Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson-Smith. I'll be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at the Kennedy Space Center. Our editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our photographer, Adam Bernstein, is out manning the tracking cameras and preparing to do some still photography as well. Our other photographer, Michael Kane, has this evening off, but if you're not already following the fellows on X, you can find them over on that site. Adam is at 8burn NYC. Michael Kane is at MD Kane Jr. Why, there you can also follow Spaceflight Now by simply searching for Spaceflight Now. If you're not on X, you can find us on Threads as well as Facebook and most recently Blue Sky. We'll also be joined with tracking assistance by our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, taking a look at their camera view of the Falcon 9 rocket here. Also be joined by our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions. Time currently T-minus 58 minutes and counting as we're looking forward to this launch of the Falcon 9 rocket there at the heart of Historic Launch Complex 39A. Want to thank our moderators in the live chat for checking in and helping us out tonight. I see Callistia Lee reporting for duty, and believe Callistia may be flying solo for now. Just doing a quick scroll. If any of the other mods do happen to pop in tonight, be sure to give them a big ol' hello. We're also powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube, so thanks to folks like Cumulus Granatus, Chris Bilberry, Rolly Nevels, Commuting in Atlanta. It's a great handle. The Rocket Girl, Sharon Walker, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop. That is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments here at the Cape in 4K, and access to our Discord community. Good evening as well to other channel members like Hunter Fox, Jersey Jen, Rita Loy, and many others as you join in. As you're settling on in for the duration of this live launch coverage, you could do us a big favor and help bring this coverage to more folks around the internet by just clicking the like button. Allows the YouTube algorithm to recognize that y'all are here and engaged. Bring this coverage to more people as we continue on through the count, and that is always greatly appreciated. Speaking of channel members, want to welcome Irina Varro joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. We appreciate that, Irina. Glad to have you with us. And a big thanks to Jersey Jen, a pre-existing channel member. Thanks for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. And so to our other now newest channel member, welcome aboard to you. We're glad to have you as part of our community here. Be sure to thank Jersey Jen in the live chat if you haven't already. And we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other happenings going on in the realm of space and spaceflight, go ahead and use the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we continue on through the countdown, but you'll also be helping to support what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that is very much appreciated. We are, of course, on night 2 of this attempt to launch will be the latest batch of Starlink satellites getting ready to join the fleet already up in low Earth orbit. This mission poised to be SpaceX's 81st dedicated Starlink launch so far in 2021. SpaceX ran the length of their launch window yesterday, unable to move forward with the launch. If you're watching our 24-hour live stream over on Launchpad Live, you may have noticed there were a couple of trucks that were out there at the pad as we were getting close to the end of the launch window, as well as mechanical lift that was doing some work examining near the base of the strongback, or the transporter erector you see there. No word from SpaceX on the extent of the work that they were doing or the examination that was being done, but things seem to be much calmer at the pad today, so presumably whatever work was needing to be done has been completed. SpaceX is pressing towards liftoff at the beginning of the window at 10:06 p.m. Eastern, 0306 UTC. NASA also emphasizing their alternative to the Yuletide log that folks sometimes like to have up in the background, pop up on the TV. Saw it there on the wide shell. Go ahead and bring that back here for just a moment. NASA's answer to the Yule log is the Artemis log, if you will. A little bit bright just because the countdown clock was left up in the daylight settings as opposed to being dimmed. But that's a loop of the ignition of the Artemis 1 Space Launch System rocket, couched within an animated fireplace there. So, cute nod to Yuletide festivities, as of course here in the United States we are coming upon the Thanksgiving holiday, but if you ask anyone in retail, we are thoroughly in the throes of Christmas holiday season. NASA getting in on the action here. Currently at T-minus 52 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. This flight also set to be SpaceX's 402nd Falcon 9 rocket launch to date once it does leave the pad. As we press towards the point in which SpaceX will need to make the call on the start of prop load, let's go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline and what we're anticipating as SpaceX marches towards those upcoming milestones. Nominally at T-minus 38 minutes is when the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load. If SpaceX feels like they're in a good position to do so, they can proceed with that electronic pull a little bit early, but nominally happens right about the T-minus 38 minute mark. With that go-ahead given, fueling starts at T-minus 35 minutes with a couple of events, the loading of RP-1, or a rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, and liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. 5 minutes after that, they start loading cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels of the Falcon 9's first stage. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. They'll do the same on the second stage about 4 or so minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes is when second stage RP-1 loading concludes. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process begins. That's when SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. We'll see that manifest by the so-called big vent that comes about roughly T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. That vent lasts until about T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds when it tapers off. Preparation for that second stage LOX load to begin at T-minus 16 minutes. Moving right along, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base, the Falcon 9 booster, gets underway at T-minus 7 minutes. SpaceX flows a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps and helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes is when the strong back retract sequence gets underway. Starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, reclines about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before launch, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage, about a minute thereafter, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, means control of the countdown is being handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure, and then at the 45-second mark, SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and of course, if all 9 Merlins are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold-down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff, coming up again at 10:06 p.m. Eastern, 03:06 UTC, T-minus 48 minutes and 33 seconds. SpaceX continues on with its very rapid launch cadence, closing out the year 2024. Let's take a look at where they stand on the year as far as their Falcon family of rockets prior to this launch. They've accomplished 118 so far as of their most recent flight, just yesterday morning. This bar chart encompasses, of course, all Falcon rockets, including Falcon 9A and Falcon Heavy. So there have been 116 Falcon 9 launched so far this year, 2 Falcon Heavy missions on the docket. Of course, there was some recent Falcon Heavy news, not for a launch that's going to happen anytime in the immediate future, but coming up in 2028 is when SpaceX's Falcon Heavy is expected to launch NASA's Dragonfly mission. This is a quadcopter drone that is going to be heading out on a pretty exciting mission. It's going to be heading to the moon of Titan belonging to Saturn. The launch date period running from July 5th of 2028 to July 5th through the 25th. And that Falcon Heavy rocket will lift off from the pad you see live right here on your screen, Historic Launch Complex 39A. Dragonfly mission is one that has excited a lot of folks in the space community, as it's going to be searching the composition of Saturn's moon of Titan and studying it in order to determine if Saturn does in fact, as it is believed, to have some of the quote-unquote building blocks of life. We're now T-minus 42 minutes, 55 seconds and counting. Just a few minutes away from the nominal point at which the SpaceX launch director will need to make the call on the start of prop load for tonight's mission. At this point, again, SpaceX continues to target liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket at 10:06 p.m. Eastern, 0306 UTC. A little bit dark, so hard to tell, but the weather coming into tonight's launch opportunity pretty pristine as it was for last night's launch window. The 45th Weather Squadron forecast a greater than 95% chance of favorable weather at liftoff. There were no concerns as far as constraints. So nothing like cumulus clouds or liftoff winds, none of it. And no items of note in the additional risk criteria. So upper level wind shear, boost recovery weather, all of that is at the best possible case that it could be. Very clear night here on Florida's Space Coast. A good night for stargazing for folks that have good capability to do so. If you're able to get out into a darker part of the county, wherever you may be watching from, if you're here in Central Florida, get out and go stargazing. You can keep the broadcast on in the background, maybe just flip your phone over until it's closer to launch so that you're not creating any additional light pollution for yourself. Taking a look at our live chat here. First off, want to thank Wolverine Warlord for joining us back again tonight, gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Appreciate that, Wolverine. And to our newest 5 channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Wolverine in the live chat if you haven't already. Also have a super chat from Mr. James Castile. Appreciate that, James. Who asks, does the Falcon 9 vehicle have an emergency system to save the payload should there be a major malfunction very early after clearing the tower? Enjoy the coverage Spaceflight Now provides. Appreciate you writing in, James. I'll say yes and no, and the answer depends on what is at the top of the Falcon 9 stack. In the case of a crewed mission, so a crewed Dragon spacecraft, yes, there are the Super Draco thrusters that can very quickly jettison the Falcon or the Dragon spacecraft away from the Falcon 9 rocket in the event of an emergency with the rest of the vehicle. And the Dragon spacecraft would use its parachute system to gently splash down in the waters wherever it was lifting off from. Of course, as the Falcon 9 makes its trip up towards the International Space Station, there are multiple abort zones along that path that are optimal for safe recovery of the Dragon spacecraft. There are also emergency contingencies for a cargo Dragon spacecraft in a similar fashion following the CRS-7 mission. However, when it comes to a flight like you see today where there are payload fairings and a payload that is not heading to the International Space Station, not utilizing a cargo Dragon spacecraft, unfortunately there is not an emergency contingency where you could jettison just the payload fairings and the payload away. But good question. Now currently T-minus 38 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. Less than a minute away nominally from the point at which SpaceX is going to make the call on the start of prop load here for the Starlink 6-76 mission set to lift off just after the top of the hour. As per usual, with a rocket launch here from Florida Space Coast, the Brevard County Emergency Operations Center has activated in support of this mission. As we like to say, they are one of the busiest EOCs around the country since they activate in support of all of the launch activity that happens here, both at the Kennedy Space Center as well as at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. They have a group of folks that are on standby and are ready to respond in the case of an emergency that would impact public safety. They're able to very quickly mobilize and address whatever may be relevant to the emergency. So, always on standby. Of course, they're busy not only with spaceflight activity, but we do live here in the Sunshine State of Florida, which is prone to hurricanes and other natural disasters. So naturally, they are also capable and raring to respond in the event of any type of natural impact to the region. And as certainly possible is the case, we do have a new T0 with this mission tonight. A punt of just 10 minutes right now. Looking at a T0 time of 10:16 p.m. Eastern. That is 03:16 UTC. We have reset our countdown clock accordingly. Now currently T-minus 45 minutes, 38 seconds, and counting. Launch window today does run until 1:30 a.m. Eastern, as long as SpaceX has not begun fueling its Falcon 9 rocket. SpaceX uses a load and go style of fueling, essentially meaning that they will tank the rocket till pretty close to the point in which they need to launch. And so once fueling has begun, they don't have the option to hold the countdown, and so SpaceX wants to be essentially sure that when they are in a good position to launch is when they start fueling the rocket so that they don't waste a launch opportunity. Now currently T-minus 39 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. Once again, back before the point at which SpaceX launch director needs to make a call on the start of prop load for today's mission. As we are awaiting that call, do want to thank a few folks for their support tonight. I want to thank Brian for joining us the channel membership at the Pad Leader level. Appreciate that, Brian. Glad to have you in the fold, and thanks to Psychonaut69 for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Appreciate that generosity, Psychonaut. To our newest channel member, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Speaking of good news, we are joined this evening by Mr. Jim Edgar and Lisa Bean with a very generous super chat. Really appreciate that level of generosity, Jim, who says, watching the launch with, and this is the happy part of the message, 2 new kittens. Well, you probably heard little Millie passed recently, so we now have Chrissy and Lola now. Kip is teaching them about Miko and Max Q. That is adorable. Appreciate you writing in, Jim, and letting us know your wonderful cat family has expanded. It's fabulous. Perhaps if there are future kittens, you could name one of them Miko or Max Q. Now, there are lots of space-themed pet names. local time now, 9:42 p.m. Eastern. It is our understanding that SpaceX is not fueling the Falcon 9 rocket right now, as a fact adjusting their T0 time. It's our understanding that SpaceX is currently targeting 10:55 p.m. Eastern, 03:55 UTC. We've adjusted our countdown clock accordingly. Time currently stands at T-minus 1 hour, 12 minutes, 5 seconds, and counting. No word from SpaceX as to the reason for the pushback into the window, but SpaceX launch window today does last until 1:30 a.m. Eastern, again as long as they have not begun fueling their Falcon 9 rocket. Now T-minus 1 hour, 7 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. For those of you who may just be joining us, Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight. Now you're watching our live launch coverage of the Starlink 6-76 mission. Batch of 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites on board this particular Falcon 9 rocket. Going to be flying in a southeasterly trajectory once it leaves the pad. We have had a couple of shifts in the T0 time as it currently stands. We're marching towards 10:55 departure of this Falcon 9 rocket, barring any additional updates from SpaceX. The window today does last until 1:30 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday, November 27th. And again, SpaceX is using a load and go style of fueling, so once it does begin tanking its Falcon 9 rocket, it is committing to that T0 time for a launch attempt. So until they are surely ready to do so, they will not begin fueling their Falcon 9 for this mission. As we continue to track the countdown, I want to thank a few folks for your support tonight. Our thanks to channel member Chuck Close joining us again this evening with a very generous $20 to $5 super chat. Really appreciate that, Chuck. Another channel member, the Astronomers, with a $10 super chat. Appreciate that, the Astronomers, who says we are so excited for Dragonfly, talking about the mission to Saturn's moon of Titan. Astronomers add, happy Thanksgiving, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving, everyone, once again. Never spread too much holiday cheer. Channel member Greg Williams has been with us, marking 14 months at the mission specialist level. A little tongue-in-cheek here. As God is my witness, I thought Starlinks could fly. Happy Thanksgiving. Appreciate that, Greg. Wolverine Warlord also marking 14 months with us as a channel member at the Path Leader level. Appreciate that, Wolverine. Talking about the delay with the launch tonight. With the thought that it may be connected to helium. I will couch for now that we don't have a definitive reasoning as to the delay for tonight's launch. However, of course, helium is an important component of SpaceX's launch profile, as that cryogenic helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks for flight, both on the Falcon 9's first and second stages. So continue to watch all parts of the preparation process as we continue on and hopefully get closer to a T0 liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. Now just a little more than an hour away as it currently stands. I also want to thank Mitchell Wilbur, another one of our wonderful channel members, for a $20 super chat. Just offering some support tonight, which is very kind of you, Mitchell. Brian gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that. Channel member Brian. To our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Brian in the live chat if you haven't already. I hope you stick around with channel membership. Finally, for now, Space Pony getting in the Thanksgiving spirit. Little gobble gobble. Since we do have an expanded timeline, we'll be sure to revisit this as we get closer to liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. But since I know this question comes up quite often, let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket will be flying once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Taking a look at a Google Earth view of Launch Complex 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. Once the rocket does leave the pad, it will fly in a southeasterly trajectory heading towards the Caribbean. First stage booster will follow the path of that red line there and touch down on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. Booster tonight, B-1078, is bound for the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. If successful with this booster recovery, this will mark the 87th successful booster landing on a shortfall of gravitas and the 375th Falcon booster landing to date. In addition to the booster, SpaceX will also hope to recover the payload fairings. They splash down into the water of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of parachutes. And SpaceX saves about $6 million per recovery effort, so it's an important part of their business model to be able to retrieve these fairing halves, refurbish them, and reuse them in future flights. They do so by bringing them aboard one of their recovery vessels and then ferrying that into Port Canaveral, turning it over to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where they go through that refurbishment work. SpaceX can fit, I believe the most you've seen on one of these recovery vessels is 4 payload fairings on board at any given time. Most recently, SpaceX has noted their current flight leader as far as payload fairings are concerned is one half that has flown 21 missions so far. SpaceX is working to certify both its first stage, second stage, or excuse me, its first stage boosters as well as the payload fairings for up to 40 flights apiece. As far as the boosters are concerned, the launch leader is B-1067, which is launched and landed 23 times so far. Now T-minus 59 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. May have noticed the view of the bottom of the rocket a little bit harder to see now than it was the beginning of our live coverage here. There's some fog that's starting to roll in around Launch Complex 39A. Taking a wider view from our camera down at the turn basin gives you a little bit better picture there. Now, while fog may be a little obstructive as far as our camera view in part here at the press site, fog would not be an impediment to launch, so just something to note, but not something that would cause SpaceX to delay the mission. Now T minus 57 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. Assuming that the current T0 of 10:55 remains as it currently stands, we're about a little under 20 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director will once again be needing to make a call on the start of prop load for tonight's mission. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank channel member Patty Chichil for a $5 super chat. Appreciate that, Patty, who says, saw the ISS tonight up here in Springfield, Massachusetts. I was out and about, so drove closer to try to get a good picture. Didn't work out too well. Well, suppose that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. But very cool that you saw the ISS overhead. I just want to thank Douglas Sheffield for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that generosity, Doug. And to our newest 10 channel members, welcome aboard to all of you. Glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Douglas in the live chat. We hope you decide to stick around with a channel membership. As we're awaiting the flight of this Falcon 9 rocket, love to see where folks are joining us from, whether you're here in Florida in the Sunshine State, like friend Sarah Carpenter and cousin David joining us from England, taking some time here in Florida to celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday. See Rick Denton checking in from Iraq. Rusty Shackelford down in Miami. Let us know whether close or far where you're watching from tonight. See Lancaster, Pennsylvania from Wally Ballqueen, Plant City, Florida. Number of folks here in Florida, of course, Central Florida, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, Ambrose, Georgia, not too far to our north, Indianapolis. Got some New Jersey, New Mexico, Naples, Knoxville, Tennessee, St. Augustine, Greenville, South Carolina. It's wonderful to see folks from all over the United States and the world joining us tonight, so really appreciate you taking some time to check out this launch coverage, and hopefully there will be a launch at the end of it. We'll continue to monitor any updates with the T0 and pass those along to you as we learn them. Time now currently T-minus 51 minutes and counting. Taking a look at the live chat again. Want to thank Well-Reasoned Superhawk, marking 12 months with us as a channel member at the Pad Leader level. Says, loving your coverage from Orlando this evening. Appreciate you joining us and for sticking around with channel membership. Kai with a $10 super chat, checking in from Duluth, Minnesota. Still pursuing employment with SpaceX. Best of luck to you, Kai. And Psychonaut69 joining us at channel membership, now at the launch director level. Appreciate you hopping on the bandwagon with us, Psychonaut. Happy to have you on board. Time now T-minus 49 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. As we are keeping our eyes on the pad here at 39A, watching for the developments with this Falcon 9 mission, we are getting a great view of one of our celestial neighbors a little bit farther out. Taking a look from our friend P. Carson's camera view of the gas giant Jupiter. Of course, we've got couple missions on their way out to Jupiter right now. The Europa Clipper mission that was launched atop a Falcon Heavy rocket has been making some good progress out to Jupiter. Should be arriving in 2030, if my memory serves. Also, the European Space Agency, or ESA mission called JUICE, the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, also on its way to explore Jupiter. However, it's going to be taking a broader look at a few more moons, Ganymede, Callisto, as well as Europa. The JUICE mission launched back on April 14th. Top an Ariane 5 rocket down in French Guiana. JUICE is set to arrive at Jupiter in July of 2031. So lots of Jupiter-based science coming our way at the beginning of the next decade. Lots to look forward to. We'll give Pete a second if he's able to adjust his exposure to allow us to see the moons around Jupiter. We'll bring back that camera view as we've got a good view of some of the nearby moons hanging around. Appreciate that, Pete. He's going to just adjust a little bit more. That looks good. If you take a look at the brightest dots that are adjacent to Jupiter, starting from the closest proximity and then moving to the top of the frame. You can see Europa is the closest dot, the closest moon to Jupiter from this vantage point right now. Then a little bit further out is Io, and then Ganymede. And as Pete adjusts, moving Jupiter higher up in the frame, you can see near the bottom of the big box, that is the moon Callisto. Appreciate the celestial tour from our friend Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions. As we're now currently T-minus 46 minutes, 6 seconds, and counting. awaiting the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket with 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites on board, adding to the thousands already currently in low Earth orbit as part of SpaceX's mega constellation. This mission is set to be the 81st dedicated Starlink flight of the year so far. It will bring SpaceX to a total of 7,435 total Starlinks launched to date. Of those, 1,786 will have been launched in 2024 following the completion of this mission. According to astronomer and expert orbital tracker Jonathan McDowell, there are currently, prior to this launch, 6,742 Starlink satellites currently in orbit. Once again, we do have an update for you on the T0 time for today's mission. We are now looking at a liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket at 11:41. 11:41 is our new T0 time. We are adjusting our countdown clock accordingly. Now standing by for a launch of the Falcon 9. T-minus 1 hour, 29 minutes, 39 seconds, and counting. Now T-minus 1 hour, 22 minutes, 21 seconds and counting. If you're just joining us, you're watching live coverage from Spaceflight now of the Starlink 6-76 mission, a batch of 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites getting ready to head up to low Earth orbit atop a Falcon 9 rocket, launching from Historic Launch Complex 39A when SpaceX is ready to do so. Currently marching towards a T0 time of 11:41 p.m. Eastern. It is 04:41 UTC for our friends joining around the world. SpaceX has not disclosed the reason for the delays, but we will continue tracking the progress with the Falcon 9 rocket and let you know if there are any additional slips in the T0 time tonight. SpaceX does have a launch window that extends out to 1:30 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday, November 27th, if needed. If SpaceX is unable to launch at all during this launch window, they do have another backup opportunity tomorrow on the 27th that begins at 9:39 p.m. Eastern. With the delay of this mission, which was set to be the 224th orbital launch around the world, this launch now slides to what is set to be the 225th orbital launch, as the commercial company in China Land Space successfully launched their, apologies for my pronunciation, the Zhuqiu 2EY1 rocket, which lifted off at 0200 UTC. On board were a couple of test satellites called Guangshuan, according to Space News reporter Andrew Jones, who does an excellent job of covering the Chinese launch market, noting that this was the first launch of the enhanced version of Landspace's Zhuqiu 2 Methalox rocket. So at least one orbital launch tonight. Hopefully we'll add the Falcon 9 rocket to it as well. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank a few folks for your support this evening. Thanks to channel member Nelson Reyes for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Nelson. Good to see you this evening. And to our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Nelson in the live chat if you haven't already, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Also want to thank Psychonaut69 for $5 super chat saying, "Hey Will, hope you have a happy Thanksgiving day." Well, thank you. Certainly intend to. Got some family in town right now. The in-laws are here, and the pie baking has already begun at the homestead. So looking forward to diving into that a little bit later this week. Monkey Tree Rob with a $2 super chat. Just a little bit of support tonight. Appreciate that, Monkey Tree. And thanks as well to Talon Richardson with a $5 super chat saying this coverage is great and I always look forward to the next Starlink launches. Shows network improvement is actually happening. SpaceX continues their aggressive pace of Starlink launches. In fact, just earlier today announced that they received FCC approval to begin some beta work and rollout of their direct-to-cell capabilities with part of their Starlink constellation. So very important part of the SpaceX business model, getting the green light from federal regulators here in the United States. We'll keep our eyes out for when beta service begins to roll out to a customer base here in the U.S. as SpaceX has chosen to partner with T-Mobile for their direct-to-cell venture here in the United States, as well as a number of other telecom providers around the world. Some very kind words from Charles Boyer, one of our channel members. The $10 super chat saying Spaceflight now is definitely in the list of things to be thankful for. Have a great holiday, guys. It's very kind of you, Charles. And for those unaware, Charles, man behind Talk of Titusville, very important piece of local journalism here on the Space Coast. So appreciate the kind words, Charles, and we're thankful for the work that y'all do over at Talk of Titusville. Monitoring not only activities here that relate to space, but also local politics and things happening in the economy of the northernmost city here in Brevard County. For those who haven't visited the Space Coast, Titusville also has a lot of great launch viewing spots if you're keen to see a rocket launch for yourself. Now T-minus 1 hour, 12 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. Taking a look at the live chat here. I want to thank Craig English for a $20 super chat. Really appreciate that level of generosity, Craig. Who asks, should we experience the launch tonight? How can we tell where the main engines are going to land? Referring, I'm sure, to the first stage booster. SpaceX, historically, and as is the case with the launch tonight, will note on their launch page on their website what drone ship they are intending to use, or in the case of a mission where they are able to bring the booster back to land, whether it's at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station over or at Vandenberg Space Force Base, they'll note if it's going to be performing an RTLS or return to landing site mission, touching down at here at the Cape. They have landing zones 1 and 2. Vandenberg, they have landing zone 4. However, so far at this point, SpaceX has not performed or not been able to perform a return to landing site operation with the Falcon 9 first stage booster, given the performance that it needs to exert getting those now 24 Starlink satellites to their intended orbit. So SpaceX will land this booster, tail number 1078 in the SpaceX fleet, on the drone ship called a Shortfall Gravitas, which is positioned down near the Caribbean. Thanks for the super chat. While we're waiting for this Falcon 9 rocket to fly, let's go ahead and talk about those Starlink satellites that are on board. On board this Falcon 9 rocket are 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites. When this mission is ready to launch, it will mark the 81st Starlink mission of the year. Each of these clocks in about 1,760 pounds, or roughly 800 kilograms. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet, or 30 meters. They use argon Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering, as opposed to the previously used Krypton Hall thrusters. They were built in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle, and they'll be deployed at about 180 miles or 291 kilometers in altitude at a 43-degree inclination. An upgrade from their predecessors, they use 4 times the capacity. They introduced E-band for backhaul. They have an upgraded phased array antenna, and they're about 2.6 times heavier than the previous Starlink version 1.5 satellites. Starting to see some venting from the strong back there, which hopefully is a good indication that SpaceX is in a position where they will be able to launch this mission coming up in just a little more than an hour from now. Thanks to the folks at Black Sky/HEO. This is good image of what a Starlink V2 mini satellite looks like when it's in the on-orbit configuration. Here's a picture of those Argon Hall thrusters in a indoor test. Now currently T-minus 1 hour, 2 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. Want to thank Ramraj MGV for a 22 rupee super chat. Appreciate the support tonight, Ramraj. At T-minus 1 hour, 50 seconds and counting. Want to thank Dave Krupel for a very generous $20 super chat. Appreciate that, Dave. Who asks, how do the Falcons stay secure to the drone ship once they touch down? Presumably they have to deal with some rocking waves en route back to the home base. The drone ships are equipped with a type of robotic grabbing device called the Octo Grabber. That's used to help stabilize the boosters as they come back to Port Canaveral and deal with the rocking motion of the ocean. So, good question, Dave. Also want to thank Mandy J. Hutz Houston for a $5 super chat as well. Thank you, Mandy. Appreciate your support tonight. Now, less than an hour, presumably, to the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. Still seeing some venting from the strong back here, as we're now less than an hour from the currently set time for departure of this Falcon 9 rocket. As now currently T-minus 58 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. The still persisting venting that we're seeing is coming from the section of the strong back that has to deal with the liquid oxygen portion. While not certainly 100% definitive, could be an indication of the reason that we've been seeing the delays with this particular flight, potentially having to do with the lock system on the connected to the Falcon 9 rocket. This venting lasting certainly longer than is typical prior to the launch of a Falcon 9. Usually we'll see a little bit of venting around the sometimes T-minus 2 hour mark. Usually again a little bit ahead of an hour before planned liftoff, but the duration and the amount of venting that we're seeing from this point at this time is a little bit out of character from historically a nominal countdown. So just something to note as we're continuing to watch for additional updates on this mission. As it currently stands, SpaceX is pressing towards a T0 of 11:41 p.m. Eastern, 04:41 UTC. Now T-minus 54 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. This may have caught the venting that we were seeing from the strong back has concluded. See what this may portend as far as our progress towards a launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. Now T-minus 51 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Just taking a look at the live chat, seeing our moderator force has grown since the last time I actually took a notable look at it. Appreciate our friends Aussie Space Girl, Astro Joe, and Astro Jen checking in with us here and helping to support Callistia Lee with moderator duties. Appreciate all four of you helping us out tonight. As we continue to track the progress of this Falcon 9 rocket, again, still, as far as we know, marching towards a T0 liftoff time of 11:41 p.m. Eastern, 04:41 UTC. Let's go ahead and talk about the launch timeline. Talked about the countdown timeline a little bit earlier on in the countdown process, but let's go ahead and pivot to the sequence of events for when the Falcon 9 rocket does leave the pad. With a liftoff currently set again for 11:41 p.m. Eastern, 04:41 UTC. The rocket will pass through max Q, or the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle, about 1 minute and 10 seconds into the flight. That'll be followed by a trio of events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, about 2 minutes and 25 seconds post liftoff. That'll be followed a few seconds later by stage separation, and then the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite for the start of its first burn at about the 2-minute 36-second mark. Payload fairings at the top of the Falcon 9 will then be jettisoned just before the 3-minute mark. Fast forward 3 minutes after that, about T plus 6 minutes and 3 seconds, the first stage entry burn gets underway, slowing down the vehicle as it makes its way towards the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. That burn lasting, as you can see, about 24 seconds in total. It'll set up the landing burn using a single Merlin engine on the first stage booster, beginning at about T plus 7 minutes and 52 seconds, setting up for a drone ship landing about 8 minutes and 14 seconds post liftoff. The upper stage engine will conclude its first burn with a second stage engine cutoff, or SECO 1, about T plus 8 minutes and 39 seconds into the mission. It'll enter into a coast phase until 54 minutes and 2 seconds. And there will be a brief 2-second burn, circularizing the orbit, allowing the Starlink satellites on board this Falcon 9 rocket to be deployed into a good orbit. T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 11 seconds post liftoff. Now T minus 47 minutes, 47 seconds, and counting to that launch point. As best we can tell, SpaceX is on track for a liftoff at 11:41, 04:41 UTC. The launch director will go ahead and make that call for the start of prop load in less than 10 minutes, nominally. Now T-minus 44 minutes, 41 seconds and counting. Now about 6.5 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director is going to make the call on the start of prop load tonight. If you haven't already, now is as good a time as any to remind folks to subscribe here to the channel Spaceflight Now. It's a quick, easy, and free way to support what we do here at the channel. When you do, be sure to click the bell icon and turn on notifications so that way you're alerted when we do start these live launch broadcasts and upload new videos here to the channel as well. You can also go ahead and give this live stream a boost just by clicking the like button if you haven't already. That'd be greatly appreciated. Speaking of appreciation, want to extend that appreciation to Skate Letter, one of our wonderful channel members, for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Appreciate that. To our newest channel member, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Skate Letter in the live chat if you haven't already, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Now T-minus 42 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. Since it's been, oh gosh, more than 100 minutes since we started this live stream, and nearly that long since we talked about the countdown timeline for today's mission. For those who may not have been with us at that point, or would just like a quick refresh, let's go ahead and talk about the milestones that we're looking for as SpaceX hopefully is now locking into their current T0. Nominally speaking, SpaceX will have their launch director make the call and start a prop load at about the T-minus 38 minute mark. Unlike some launch companies that use a voice call out when they're getting ready to give the go-ahead to proceed into propellant load, SpaceX does this electronically. So if they feel like they're in a good position, they can do that poll a little bit ahead of the 38 minute mark, but broadly speaking, that's about when it happens. Fueling gets underway with the loading of RP1, or a rocket-grade kerosene, being loaded on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes is when cryogenic helium starts flowing into the pressure vessels of the Falcon's first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same will happen on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes is when the second stage RP1 loading wraps up. And at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the chill down of the feed lines prior to second stage LOX load gets underway. We see this visually manifested by the so-called big vent that comes about around T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. That leads up to that second stage LOX load at the 16-minute mark. T-minus 7 minutes is when the engine chill sequence begins. SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps of those 9 Merlin engines, helping to protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence gets underway. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector with a strong back will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. Stays in that position until liftoff, at which point we'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before launch, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage, about a minute thereafter, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is full with about 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, It means that the countdown is being handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. 45 seconds before liftoff, the SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlins are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the command for the hold-down clamps to release the bird for a T0 liftoff. Coming up once again at 11:41 p.m. Eastern, 04:41 UTC, or hopefully, as it stands now, in 39 minutes, 7 seconds. Taking a look at our live chat, want to thank Ryan Lukaska for a $2 super chat. Appreciate that, Ryan. Who says, first launch with a family, kayak beach on the 528. We'll hope the family is all doing well. And appreciate you being with us for commentary purposes for your very first launch opportunity. Hopefully we've got one to deliver for you at the end of the current countdown as it stands right now. Also want to thank that blonde space girl for a $10 super chat. Sort of an opposite vibe of Ryan's message saying, wish I could have made it to the cave tonight. Broken heart emoji, day job comes first. Totally get it. Space girl, it's hard to make the call between the job you have to go to and the passion for space, but got to pay the bills first. And fortunately, SpaceX launches on average every 2 or so days. So if you happen to live here, it's very probable that if you miss a launch, there's another one right around the corner. Gemini Singer with a $10 super chat as well. Appreciate that, Gemini. No message, just offering some support tonight. That's always very kind. Also want to welcome Mary Ellen Torres joining us with channel membership at the Mission Specialist level. Appreciate that, Mary Ellen. We're glad to have you with us. Now T-minus 36 minutes, 8 seconds and counting. Presuming that SpaceX has, in fact, given the go-ahead for the start of fueling tonight, here's what we're looking for. If you look towards the base of the Falcon 9 rocket where the transporter erector starts to taper in, you can see just beneath the X in the blue lettering of SpaceX, there's a little bit of a lighter gradient gray band that runs parallel to the ground. It's right at that point where we'll start to see a frost line form and a little bit of vapor as well as the super cold densified liquid oxygen starts flowing on board the tanks of the Falcon 9's first stage. Of course, it is quite significantly cooler than the warm Florida air surrounding it, so that's why we start to see a little bit of vapor as that tank starts filling up. But assuming the go-ahead has been given, prop load is now underway. Now T minus 33 minutes, 58 seconds and counting. As we're watching for signs of fueling, as well as word from SpaceX confirming that fueling is underway. Again, we're looking just beneath the, a little bit hard to tell with this booster since it is flown 14 times previously. It's going for its 15th time tonight. There is a bit of heat distortion from our vantage point here at the press site, but in the next minute or so, if fueling is underway, we should be seeing some signs of it right in that part of the rocket. And we are now seeing that vapor forming near the base of the Falcon 9 first stage, which is a good visual indication that fueling is in fact underway, which means SpaceX has decided to stick with the 11:41 p.m. Eastern, 0441 UTC time as the T0 departure for this Falcon 9 rocket. So barring any technical hangups between now and then, we are T minus 31 minutes, 45 seconds away from the launch of the Starlink 6-76 mission. Now T minus 28 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. For those who are just now joining us, Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. You're watching our live coverage here at Spaceflight Now of the Starlink 6-76 mission currently in progress. After a few delays of the mission liftoff time, the T0 is now locked in at 11:41 p.m. Eastern, 04:41 UTC. SpaceX is fueling its Falcon 9 rocket there at Historic Launch Complex 39A. This mission is the 81st dedicated Starlink flight of the year so far. On board are 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites. At this stage in the countdown, SpaceX is also loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels, the Falcon 9's first stage, in addition to the RP-1, which is flowing aboard the first and second stages, and the liquid oxygen, which is being loaded on board the first stage, which is giving us the frost layer that you're seeing slowly build up on the first stage, and that vapor that is wrapping around the skin of the rocket. SpaceX will start loading cryogenic helium into the storage tanks on the second stage in about 2-ish minutes. Now T-minus 23 minutes and counting. As fueling is continuing on this Falcon 9 rocket, let's go ahead and talk about the booster history of this Falcon 9 first stage, getting ready to fly for a 15th time coming up here in just a little less than 23 minutes now. First flew with a crew of 4 on the Crew 6 mission up to the International Space Station, lifting off on March 2nd, 2023, sending Crew Dragon Endeavour up to the orbiting outpost. That was followed by a pair of satellites built by Boeing, the O3B Empower satellites number 3 and 4, launching on April 28th. Group of Starlinks followed that mission. You had Starlink 6-4 on June 4th, Starlink 6-8 on August 7th, 6-16 on September 16th, and 6-31 on December 3rd. That was followed up by mission for the U.S. Space Force USSF 124, launching on Valentine's Day of this year. And we're basically back to Starlink land for most of the missions thereafter. Starlink 6-46 on March 25th, Starlink 6-53 on April 23rd, 6-60 on May 28th, 10-2 on June 23rd, 10-6 on August 2nd. That was followed up by a mission for AST Space Mobile, launch of Bluebird satellites 1 through 5, the Block 1 version of AST Space Mobile's low Earth orbit constellation. They actually just booked a series of missions with SpaceX as well as Blue Origin and its New Glenn rocket to launch the Block 2 version of the Bluebird satellites over the course of the next couple of years. Most recently, this booster launched Starlink mission 10-13 back on October 30th. As we're getting ready to see the start of the big vent here in a few seconds, signaling the condition of feed lines ahead of second stage LOX load, and there you see the big vent now underway. Now T-minus 17 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. Taking a look at the Falcon 9 briefly from our friend Chuck and Jen Briggs' perspective. Appreciate them for supporting our launch coverage tonight, as well as Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions, from whose camera we saw the views of Jupiter and its moons a little bit earlier on in the broadcast. Got about 35 seconds left on this vent here at the pad prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. You see the big vent has wrapped up. Second stage liquid oxygen load set to begin in about 15 seconds. Now T-minus 13 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. Taking a look at our live chat here. First off, want to thank the now more than 10,000 of you who are with us live this evening. Appreciate your time and attention. If you haven't already, we could certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. Allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we continue on through the final bit of this countdown tonight. I just want to thank a few folks for their direct support. Our thanks to Bone Umfress for a $2 super chat and then a $10 super chat. Thank you, Bones. Sulfur for Lunch, one of our wonderful channel members, with a 50 SEK super chat. Thank you, Sulfur. Appreciate the support tonight. Noah Stevens with a $10 super chat, checking in saying, hello, can you say hi to my papa? He always watches your live videos and goes out in his backyard to watch the rocket launch. He loved it. we'd love it if you could please say hello to Papa from Lakewood. Hello to Noah's Papa. Appreciate you always checking us out, and hope you're having a good evening tonight and that it's not too cold in your neck of the woods. Also want to thank Lisa Bondurant for a $2 super chat. Appreciate that, Lisa. And thanks again to Noah for another $2 super chat. Thanks, Noah. Also, as we head towards, I believe Rivalry Week is coming up fairly soon, but some fighting words from Wolverine Warlord, one of our channel members, calling out the Ohio State from the perspective of Michigan. Some big rivals in the Big Ten. And I know that's going to be a hotly watched game, so hoping for a good match for all involved. I'll go ahead and take myself out of calling a side on that one, but appreciate the super chat. Thanks as well to Mark Slowell for a $5 super chat and to Chris Lee for a $20 super chat. Thank you, Marks, and thank you, Chris, for supporting at that level. Now T-minus 10 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. As SpaceX prepares to launch its Falcon 9 rocket in now just about 10 minutes, let's go ahead and talk about the workhorse vehicle for the company. Falcon 9 rocket, which stands 70 meters or 229 feet tall, has diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet, the majority of which is made up of the Falcon 9's first stage, bottom two-thirds of the rocket. This booster, B-1078 in the SpaceX fleet, has flown 14 times before, looking for flight number 15 tonight. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the Droneship. Again, tonight SpaceX is using the Droneship called a shortfall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. And the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see those deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the Droneship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the Falcon 9's second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket is powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 24 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. The upper stage of the Falcon 9 uses the same propellant mix, that being kerosene and liquid oxygen, as the first stage does. Following the deployment of the Starlink satellites, it will ignite for a third time as a deorbit burn, helping to drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it burns up, and that helps to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings, which encapsulate the 24 Starlink satellites. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material, and they stand 13.1 meters, or 43 feet tall, and are 5.2 meters, or 17.1 feet in diameter. The two halves of the payload fairings will be recovered a little further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. They gently splash down under the support of parachutes. They'll be brought back into Port Canaveral, turned over for refurbishment, and prepared for a future flight. Now T-minus 7 minutes and counting. At this point, SpaceX is getting the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines underway at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. At T-minus 6 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Since it's been a minute since we checked in on the trajectory of this mission, let's go ahead and do that one last time, as we now have a little more than 14,000 of you who are with us live tonight. Once the Falcon 9 rocket leaves the pad there at Historic Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, Falcon 9 rocket will fly in a southeasterly trajectory heading towards the Caribbean. Falcon 9 first stage following separation will head towards the drone ship called a Shortfall of Gravitas, which is stationed out in the waters of the Atlantic. Fairing halves splash down under the support of parachutes and will be brought aboard a recovery vessel, again, where they will be then ported back to Port Canaveral, turned over to SpaceX for refurbishment and preparation for a future mission. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank Jaden. Apologies if I mispronounce this. Hagiog. Appreciate the $5 super chat. It says, hi from University of Central Florida. Go Space University. And yes, for those who don't know, the pad here at LC39A lines up with a 50-yard marker there at the University of Central Florida's football stadium. So, nifty little space fact for those attending Space U. Now getting our views from the pad and some mission audio from SpaceX as well. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. The countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is in real time. What's coming in from SpaceX is on a slight delay. So as long as we have our camera views from our tracking cameras here on the ground, we'll be making our call in real time based on that until we're pivoting to strictly the onboard camera views from the Falcon 9 rocket itself. See the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings have opened up, and the transporter erector reclining back away from the Falcon 9 rocket momentarily. Want to quickly thank a few more folks. Thanks to Patty Chichil for gifting a Spacefly Now membership. Appreciate that generosity, Patty. And welcome to our newest channel member. And thank you to Wolverine Warlord for upgrading their membership to the Launch Director level. Also want to thank Falconer TRX for a $3 super chat, saying, stuck in TSA. Will the launch till I get on board? Well, I wish I could, Falconer, but the countdown is very much out of my hands. Hope you're able to make it on board in time for your flight.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Good call from SpaceX. Now just awaiting the conclusion of Stage 2 liquid oxygen load. Also want to thank Commander Elysium 51RA for a $5 super chat. Says they were just at Kennedy Space Center yesterday, watching from my driveway in Central Florida now. Appreciate you joining us tonight. And Falconer TRX with another $3 super chat saying, Space and Miami are all about the U. Now 2 minutes before liftoff.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that call, the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. The venting you're seeing here from the strong back of the ground gas closeouts.
Ground gas closeout.
Now about a minute before launch. Next call we should be hearing is that the Falcon 9 is in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Countdown now being handed over from the ground computers to the onboard system. Waiting a call for go for launch.
LDs go for launch.
And with that call, we are now less than 30 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. Under a cloudless Florida night sky. 20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-67 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Just now. We're looking for 3 events in fairly rapid succession now. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, about 2 minutes and 25 seconds into the mission. It'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine. Should be hearing a call for MVAC chill shortly. Now 2 minutes into flight.
Impact chill.
Good call from SpaceX, says they are thermally conditioning that Merlin vacuum engine prior to its ignition. great tracking work by our team around Central Florida. Now coming up on Miko. There you see Miko. Stage separation. And ignition of the Merlin engine.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back ignition.
Good calls, good views from the Falcon 9 rocket. We're now just seconds away from payload fairing deployment. There go the fairings. Some great tracking views on a very clear night
Fairing
here in
separation
Florida.
confirmed.
Coming up on the 4th minute into flight here. In about 2 minutes, we'll see the start of the first stage entry burn, which will last about 24 seconds in total. So far, a nominal flight of this Falcon 9 rocket in both of its stages. In the big box, you're seeing our ground tracking cameras. You're right now looking at Pete Carson's camera with Max Key Productions. And a view of that Merlin vacuum engine's glow on the ground here in Brevard County. Bottom right-hand corner box is the onboard camera from the Falcon 9 second stage, toggling between both sides of the Merlin vacuum engine. And this will look up through the inner stage now in the upper right-hand box. Now approaching 5.5 minutes into this flight, we're a little more than 30 seconds away from the start of that first stage entry burn. Given the clarity of the night, there's a decent chance that we may be able to see that entry burn with our ground tracking cameras. Now watching the Merlin vacuum engine here as we reposition one of our tracking assets to try to capture that entry burn. If we are able to spot it, we'll be sure to bring it to you. It should be starting in the next couple of seconds. There we've got that entry burn beginning. Well done, team.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Falcon 9 first stage now slowing down dramatically. Entry burn should be wrapping up here. There's the conclusion in real time. Still seeing it from the onboard cameras on a slight delay.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Some good callouts from SpaceX here. So we're now a little more than 6.5 minutes into flight. And we're just about a minute away from the start of the first stage landing burn, where the first stage booster will use just one of its Merlin engines to bring in the Falcon 9 first stage booster B-1078 in for its final touchdown on the drone
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
called a short fall of gravitas. That call you just heard, that the FTS being saved on the second stage, that is the flight termination system, no longer needed at this stage in the mission.
Stage 1 transonic.
Now about 20 seconds away from the start of the landing burn from the onboard cameras.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2, terminal deck guidance.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And while something seemed to interfere with the signal from the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas for the verbal call out of a good landing of the booster B-1078 from SpaceX.
Impact shutdown.
Now no orbit insertion.
And that call from SpaceX of a nominal orbit insertion after the conclusion of the first burn of the Merlin vacuum engine. The Falcon 9 upper stage now entering into a parking orbit where it will remain until T plus 54 minutes and 2 seconds into flight. And there will be a brief 2-second burn of that upper stage, helping to circularize the orbit. Preparation for the Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 11 seconds. And with what was a good liftoff and what we heard audibly as a good landing of the Falcon 9 first stage booster, we're about to turn to our mission stats as they currently stand. But before we do, want to thank a few more folks for your support tonight. Thanks to Callistia Lee for a $10 super chat. Appreciate that, Callistia. Savicius of Texas, one of our other wonderful channel members. This obviously coming in before the liftoff, saying go for launch. And yes, they finally were. And I'm Lita with a $5 super chat, saying awesome as always. Great to be here with these great group of people. Thanks, Will and the team. Appreciate you as always, Lita. Good to see you this evening. With that, let's go ahead and take a look at these mission stats as they currently stand. This was the 15th flight of that Falcon 9 first stage booster, B-1078. This marked the 402nd Falcon 9 launch to date, the 117th Falcon 9 just this year. This was also the 347th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. With the 2 Falcon Heavy missions that happened this year, this was the 119th SpaceX orbital launch of 2024. It marked the 129th orbital launch for SpaceX within the last 365 days. The 94th orbital launch from Pad 39A for SpaceX, and the 188th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. We'll also note for the record that with this launch, SpaceX, using just its Falcon 9 rocket, has surpassed the total number of shuttle launches that lifted off from Pad 39A. There were a total of 82 shuttle launches from this launch pad, and now a total of 83 Falcon 9 launches. Here's our look at the Falcon 9 or the Falcon family of rockets for the year against history in bar chart form. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 87th booster landing on the Droneship Shortfall of Gravitas. That marked the 296th SpaceX Droneship landing and the 375th overall SpaceX booster landing to date. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 84th orbital launch from Florida this year, the 126th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 138th overall orbital launch from U.S. rocket company, and the 225th orbital launch from around the globe. 6 launch failures on the year. Here's where the pie chart now currently stands. U.S. with 138 missions holding 61% of the pie. China, having launched earlier this evening, now holds 26% of the pie, and Russia, with its 14 missions, has 6%. Want to thank just a couple more folks who are hitting right at the buzzer. Dayron Fernandez saying hi from Noah, Luke, and Milo down in Miami. Appreciate that in the super chat. And thanks to Jojo Mo 443 with a $2 super chat as well, saying happy launch, everyone. And yes, with a launch that finally is now in the rearview mirror, it was, in fact, a happy launch. Looking into the future here, we do have a launch scheduled from the West Coast, NROL 126 coming up in the overnight hours on November 30th. Looking past the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States. Next time this pad should be in action, potentially will be in support of the Sirius XM-9 mission. The latest satellite for, of course, Sirius XM. Be sure to head over to spaceflightnow.com, click on the launch schedule tab for the very latest on these and other upcoming orbital missions. We hope you decide to join us when those launches come about. Want to thank our wonderful moderators in the live chat, Callistia Lee, Aussie Space Girl, Astro Joe, and Astro Jen for helping us out today. Want to thank our wonderful channel member community broadly for your ongoing support of what we do here at Spaceflight Now, allowing us to bring you these live launch opportunities continuously. Our thanks to our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs over at C&J Images for providing excellent tracking view of the Falcon 9 rocket tonight. In that realm, also want to thank our own Adam Bernstein for his work shooting the rocket and getting some still photography as well. If you're not following him, as well as our other photographer, Michael Kane, you really ought to do so. You can find their work over at X, formerly Twitter. Adam is at ABurnNYC, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. And you can find Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now on X, Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook. Want to thank your granny dude for a $2 super chat right at the end here, saying, yeah, go science. Hear, hear. And also want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Most importantly, though, want to thank you for wherever you're watching from. While SpaceX doesn't share the deployment of the Starlink satellites live, you can head on over to their account on X for a confirmation of deployments. That'll come up in about 45-ish minutes, probably closer to about 50 minutes following deployment. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. For those who celebrate, have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday filled with good food, friends, and family. And safe travels for those who are hitting the roads or hitting the skies to head to their Thanksgiving destinations. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, it's been wonderful to be with you this evening, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.